Look at you, Mara, you have nothing left. Is that really what you think?
Mara, what are you doing here?
I came for the vote. Then sign it, Celine. You think this changes everything?
His mistress laughed that the pregnant wife had nothing left. Until she stepped off a Tycoon's private jet holding the power to change everything. Would she use it for revenge or to reclaim her own future? Stay with us and let's begin the story. Does she really need to do this here? Dorian Hale said it quietly, but the private terminal at Teterboro was so polished and restrained that quiet words traveled farther than people expected. Mara heard him. She stood just beyond the glass entrance with one hand resting beneath the curve of her 6-month pregnancy and the other wrapped around a slim leather document folder. Behind her, a black sedan eased away from the curb. Ahead of her, executives in dark suits crossed a cream-colored lobby built to make enormous amounts of money look effortless. There were no crowds, no security lines, no children crying beside overstuffed luggage. Only leather chairs, brushed brass, private meeting rooms, and aircraft waiting beyond walls of glass. Mara looked at her husband. Dorian stood near the doors leading to the airfield, tall and controlled in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the first car they had shared. His dark hair was perfectly in place, but his jaw tightened when their eyes met. Beside him stood Celine Voss. Celine wore ivory trousers, a fitted black jacket, and the expression of a woman who had already decided how the scene would end. Mara continued walking. "I could ask the same thing," she said. Dorian's eyes narrowed.
Mara, you wanted the acknowledgement signed before you left. I said my attorney could send someone, and I said I'd bring it myself.
Celine gave a soft laugh. Not loud enough to look cruel. Just loud enough to make sure the 3 Hale Meridian executives standing near the coffee bar heard it. Mara knew 2 of them. One looked down immediately. The other pretended to check his phone. Celine did neither. Her gaze moved from Mara's face to her stomach, then to the document folder in her hand. "She has nothing now," Celine said. Silence settled across the nearest part of the terminal. It was the sort of sentence that sounded almost absurd once spoken aloud. Yet Celine delivered it with such calm certainty that nobody initially challenged her. Mara looked at her. Celine smiled. "You resigned from Hale Meridian," Celine continued. "The apartment belongs to the company. Most of Dorian's equity is protected by the prenup. You walked away from the job, the marriage, and apparently the lifestyle too." Dorian's expression hardened. "Celine, enough." But the command came late and weak. Mara turned toward him. "Is that what you think too?" Dorian's face barely changed. That was one of the things he had learned over the years. Investors could insult him. Banks could threaten him. Contractors could tell him $100 million schedule was collapsing. His expression would remain steady, almost impossibly controlled, like the dark windows of a Manhattan tower long after everyone inside had gone home. Once, Mara had admired that quality. Now she waited for him to answer. He looked toward the airfield instead. "This isn't the place." Mara felt something inside her settle. Not break. That had happened months ago. This was quieter than breaking. This was the moment the last loose piece finally stopped moving. She nodded once. "You're right," she said. "It isn't." Dorian looked back at her. For half a second, something almost like regret moved through his face. Then Celine stepped closer to him. Mara opened the leather folder. "I signed the acknowledgement of separation." She removed several pages and held them out. Dorian did not take them immediately. "What about the settlement?" "Not signed." Celine's smile vanished. Dorian glanced at the remaining documents. "Why? Because Nadine advised me not to sign a final property agreement before an independent valuation is complete." Celine folded her arms. "Nadine Mercer?" Mara looked at her. Yes, the name clearly bothered Celine, though Mara could not tell why. Dorian finally took the papers. "Mara, the prenup is clear." "I know what the prenup says." "Then what exactly are we valuing?" "Marital earnings, joint investment accounts, property acquired after the marriage, deferred compensation, anything else our attorneys identify." Celine shook her head with faint amusement. "There it is." Mara looked at her. "There what is?" "The part everyone pretends isn't coming," Dorian said Celine. But she continued. "You spent years telling everyone you didn't care about money, Mara. Now suddenly there are valuations and lawyers." Mara closed the folder. "I hired a lawyer because my husband hired one first." That landed harder than Celine expected. Even Dorian looked away. Mara continued, her voice even. "And I'm asking for an accurate accounting, not revenge." Celine's mouth curved. Of course. Mara could have answered. She could have told Celine exactly what she thought of a woman who had spent 6 months presenting herself as Dorian's financial savior while sleeping with him before the separation was even filed. She could have reminded Dorian of the night he came home after 2 in the morning, smelling faintly of Celine's perfume, and claimed the bored dinner had run long. She could have described the look on his face when she placed the hotel receipt on the kitchen counter the next morning. None of it would change anything. So Mara let the silence do what anger could not. A man in a Navy suit approached from the airfield doors.
Mr. Hale, Ms. Voss, the aircraft will be ready to board in approximately 12 minutes.
Dorian nodded. Thank you. The man left. Mara glanced through the glass. A white Gulfstream sat on the apron beyond the terminal. Hale Meridian did not own it. The aircraft had been chartered by Voss Capital for the 2-day investor retreat outside Boston. Celine followed Mara's gaze. We're meeting 2 pension funds and a sovereign infrastructure group tomorrow, she said, assuming everything stays on schedule. The final words were aimed directly at Mara. Dorian noticed. Mara didn't come here to discuss the airport project. No, Mara said. But since you mentioned it, I need to ask you something. Dorian's expression changed, a small change. But Mara knew him well enough to recognize it. Wariness. What?
Did you approve the revised base case?
Celine answered before he could. That's confidential. I worked on the original model. You don't work for Hale Meridian anymore. I know. Then you shouldn't have access to current assumptions. I don't. Celine paused. Mara continued. But I heard enough before I resigned to know the numbers were already being pushed. Dorian exhaled slowly. Mara, the passenger growth assumption was aggressive before. The concession revenue was even worse. You haven't seen the current model. No, I'm asking whether you approved it. Dorian's gaze sharpened. You came here to sign separation papers. I came here because your attorney said you wanted them before you left. Then leave the financing to us. Mara studied him. For months, she had watched fear gradually alter the man she married. Not ordinary fear. Dorian could handle ordinary fear. This was the old kind. The kind that reached back to a childhood house taken by a bank, a father who had lost a construction company, and a mother who had packed an entire family into rented rooms while pretending everything would be fine. Dorian had told Mara that story once, years ago, lying beside her in a small Brooklyn apartment before Hale Meridian became a name anyone recognized. I will never let that happen again, he had said. She had thought he meant to his family. Eventually, she realized he meant to himself. Celine stepped between them without physically moving. The revised model reflects the upside created by the expanded terminal footprint, she said. Commercial leases, concession space, premium traffic growth. Things change. Studies don't change because you need them to. Celine's eyes cooled. You always did enjoy pointing out what everyone else got wrong. That was my job. Was. Mara ignored her and looked at Dorian. The original traffic report didn't support the kind of growth you were discussing in the last risk meeting. Dorian's face tightened further. That meeting was 4 months ago. And airport passengers didn't magically multiply because your financing deadline got closer. One of the executives near the coffee bar quietly moved away. Dorian noticed. His voice dropped. Stop. Mara felt Willa move, a small pressure beneath her ribs. She shifted her hand instinctively over her stomach. Dorian's eyes followed the movement before returning to her face. For the briefest moment, he looked like the man who used to kneel beside her at night and speak to their unborn daughter, as though she could already understand him. Then the expression disappeared. Mara hated that she still noticed. I'm not trying to embarrass you, she said.
You're questioning an active financing process in front of my staff. I'm questioning you. That's worse.
Celine almost smiled. Mara looked at Dorian for several seconds. I'm not warning you as your wife. His jaw flexed. Mara continued. I'm warning you as the person who used to find the things everyone else wanted to ignore. Dorian gave a humorless breath. And I suppose Celine is one of those things. There it was. Mara stared at him. Not because the accusation hurt, because it answered a question she had not intended to ask. He truly believed her judgment had been poisoned by jealousy. Perhaps that made things easier for him. If Mara was simply the rejected wife, then Dorian did not have to consider that the woman he betrayed might still be seeing the danger more clearly than he was. Celine tilted her head. You really expect us to believe this is professional concern? Mara turned toward her. No. Celine blinked. I don't expect anything from you. That erased the smile. Dorian stepped forward. Mara, Hale Meridian has 14 days to deliver the required capital commitments. 14.
If we lose the gateway contract, we don't just lose a project.
I know. Do you? His voice sharpened. 817 employees. Another few hundred people through subcontractors. Existing lender covenants tied to the project pipeline. Performance guarantees we already posted. This isn't a theoretical risk memo anymore. Mara's gaze stayed steady. I know exactly what's at stake. Then stop acting like caution is free. Mara went still. There were moments in a marriage when years of knowledge could fit inside one sentence. This was one. She understood what Dorian meant. He was telling her that survival sometimes required accepting risk, but beneath it she heard something else. He had spent so long fearing loss that he had begun to believe anything done in the name of avoiding it was reasonable. Celine saw the opening and used it. Voss Capital can bring committed institutional equity into the consortium, she said. We can stabilize Hale Meridian's position, preserve the guarantees, and keep the lenders from tightening terms. Mara looked at her. For preferred equity. Yes. Board rights, potential governance rights. Control provisions if certain thresholds are missed. Celine smiled slightly. You really have been doing your homework. I read the term sheet before I resigned. The old term sheet. Mara caught the emphasis. Dorian saw it too. What changed? Mara asked. Celine's expression did not move. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Mara turned back to Dorian. Did the governance rights increase? That's enough, Dorian. I said enough. His voice carried across the lobby. Several heads turned. Mara stared at him. He lowered his voice. You resigned. You made that choice after I found out about the affair. Mara. No. If we're going to rewrite history, at least do it accurately. Celine looked away, but the satisfaction in her posture remained. Dorian's face tightened. I'm not rewriting anything. You told me you needed space because the company was consuming your life. It was. You told me Celine was just part of the financing team. She was. She was also sleeping with you. Dorian closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them again, the control was back. I'm not having this conversation here. You weren't having it home either. That one struck. Mara saw it. For the first time, Dorian had no immediate answer. A chime sounded softly from somewhere near the reception desk. The Gulf Stream outside was being fueled. Celine checked her watch. Dorian. He looked at her. We cannot miss the departure window. Mara almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because that sentence explained Celine perfectly. Marriage collapsing. Pregnant wife standing 10 feet away. Hundreds of jobs at risk. And Celine was still watching the schedule. Dorian turned back to Mara. I'll have counsel review the acknowledgement. Fine, and I need the rest of the property documents by Friday. You'll get them when the valuation is complete. Mara, there's no reason to drag this out. I'm not dragging anything out. You know what I mean? Yes, she said softly. I usually did. Dorian's face changed again. This time the regret lasted longer. Mara hated that too. Because regret was easy. Regret cost nothing. Celine reached for the handle of her carry-on bag. Maybe this is healthier for everyone. Mara looked at her. Celine continued. Dorian needs someone who understands what's required right now. Mara's eyes narrowed. And you think that's you? I know it is. Because you can save his company? Because I understand what it costs to build something this large. Mara considered her. Then she said no. You understand what desperate people will give away to keep it. Celine's expression sharpened. Dorian stepped between the words before they could become something worse. Enough. Both of you. Mara almost corrected him. There was no both of you. Celine had helped destroy a marriage. Dorian had allowed her to. Mara was simply standing inside the wreckage. But she was suddenly tired. The kind of tired that came not from pregnancy but from realizing there was nothing left to explain. She picked up her handbag. Dorian watched her. Where are you staying? Mara looked at him. You know where? The Irvington house? Yes. Alone? The question startled her. Not because it was intimate. Because it sounded almost concerned. Mara placed a hand over her stomach. Willa and I will manage. Dorian flinched at the name. They had chosen it together. Willa. After Mara's grandmother. He looked at her stomach again. I want to be informed about appointments. You will be. And if anything happens, I know how to call you. His mouth tightened. Mara could feel Celine watching both of them. For 1 second, the three of them occupied an awkward shape no amount of money could make elegant. A husband. A mistress. A pregnant wife already becoming an ex-wife. Mara stepped back. Goodbye, Dorian. He did not say goodbye. He only nodded. Celine gave Mara one last look. There was triumph in it. Not wild triumph. Something colder. She believed she had won the man, the company, and the future that came with both. Mara turned away. She crossed the terminal lobby slowly, refusing to hurry even when emotion climbed painfully into her throat. Outside, afternoon light reflected off the aircraft lined along the apron. Her phone vibrated. She almost ignored it. Then she saw Nadine Mercer's name. Mara opened the secure message. The first line stopped her. Rourke Family Office has advanced the North Atlantic Gateway vote. She read on. Investment Committee review begins immediately. Final extraordinary allocation under consideration, $1.8 billion. Under the Legacy Trust Charter, your participation is mandatory unless formal recusal is accepted by committee counsel. Mara stood completely still. A second message appeared. Gideon has been informed. He cannot cast the legacy trust vote on your behalf. Call me before making any decision. Behind Mara, the terminal doors opened. She heard Celine laughing at something one of the executives had said. Then Dorian's voice. Businesslike again, controlled again, already moving forward. Mara looked across the airfield. Several aircraft sat in the distance, but one caught her attention. White fuselage. Silvertail. A dark falcon painted near the top. Rourke Meridian Aviation. Her father's emblem. The symbol had followed Mara through childhood charity galas, board dinners, private schools, airport hangars, magazine profiles, and every room where strangers changed their tone the moment they learned who her father was. At 19, she had started calling herself Mara Ellison whenever she could. At 21, after one final explosive argument with Gideon, she had walked away from every invitation to join Rourke Meridian. No salary, no office, no corporate card, no family allowance. She had built a career elsewhere, married elsewhere, made mistakes elsewhere. And for 12 years, whenever the Legacy Trust sent routine governance packages, she had done the minimum required and returned them to Nadine. She had treated the power her mother left behind like a locked room, something legally hers, something she preferred not to enter. Now Hale Meridian's future sat on the other side of that door. Mara's phone rang. Nadine, she answered. You saw the notice? Nadine asked. Yes. You need to understand the scale before you decide anything. I understand the number. The number is the easy part. Mara watched Dorian and Celine walk through the private boarding door in the distance. What's the hard part? If Rourke Family Office proceeds at the proposed level, the allocation crosses the extraordinary investment threshold. I know. That means your vote isn't symbolic. Mara closed her eyes. Nadine continued. Gideon cannot override you. The investment committee cannot substitute someone else without triggering the trust dispute provisions. If you participate, your vote matters. Mara opened her eyes. Beyond the glass, Dorian climbed the aircraft stairs. Celine followed. What if I recuse? Committee council would have to approve it. Given your prior employment at Hale Meridian and your marriage to Dorian, they may actually prefer recusal. That sounds convenient. For you, perhaps. And for everyone else? Nadine was silent for a moment. That depends on whether the current financing is as sound as everyone claims. Mara looked back toward the Silver Falcon. What have you seen? Enough to ask questions. Mara's hand tightened around the phone. Nadine. I'm not discussing sensitive investment materials over an unsecured call. You called me to make sure you didn't ignore the notice. Mara almost smiled. You know me too well. Yes, Nadine said. Unfortunately. The private jet carrying Dorian began moving away from the terminal. Mara watched it taxi. Does he know? Who, Dorian? That you hold the Legacy Trust seat? Yes. No. Mara's throat tightened. Nadine added, Gideon assumed you told him years ago. I told Dorian I wanted nothing to do with Rourke Meridian. That isn't the same thing, I know. The words came out softer than she intended. Nadine did not rescue her from them. You can deal with your marriage later, she said. Right now, I need an answer. Will you review the investment materials? Mara watched Dorian's aircraft turn toward the runway. 14 days. 817 employees. A financial model she no longer trusted. A husband who thought she was jealous. A mistress who believed Mara had nothing left. And a $1.8 billion decision sitting inside a trust Mara had spent years pretending did not belong to her. Willa moved again beneath her hand. Mara looked down. Then back at the aircraft. I'll review everything. Nadine exhaled quietly. All right. Send me the current model, the independent traffic study, the proposed VOS structure, and every investment committee memo I'm authorized to see. There was a pause. Then Nadine said, that sounds less like a recusal. It isn't a vote, not yet. Mara's eyes stayed on the Silver Falcon across the field. No, she said, not yet. The Hale Meridian jet accelerated down the runway. Seconds later, it lifted into the sky. Mara watched until it disappeared. Then she turned away from the glass and walked toward the waiting car. For the first time that day, Celine's words returned to her. She has nothing now. Mara did not feel angry anymore. She felt something far more useful. Curious. Because somewhere inside the documents Nadine was about to send her was the answer to a question nobody else in that terminal had thought to ask. Not what Mara had left, but what exactly Dorian Hale was about to risk losing. By the time Mara reached Irvington, the first investment packet was already waiting in her encrypted inbox. She did not open it immediately. Instead, she stood in the kitchen of her mother's old house with one hand against the edge of the counter and listened to the quiet. The house sat on a tree-lined street above the Hudson, close enough to Manhattan that the skyline still felt reachable, but far enough away that the city no longer pressed against every window. Alara Ellison Rourke had bought the property before Mara was born, back when Gideon still traveled commercially and Rourke Meridian was a growing aviation company rather than an empire whose name appeared on hangars, maintenance facilities, terminals, and investment documents across the country. Nothing in the house had been designed to impress anyone. The cabinets were painted cream. The hardwood floors creaked near the dining room. A dent remained in the pantry door where Mara had once driven a bicycle through the kitchen at 8 years old. Her mother had laughed so hard she had to sit down. Gideon had wanted the door replaced the next morning. Alara had refused. "It's evidence," she had said. "Of what?" Gideon asked. "That our daughter was once 8. Mara remembered that exchange more clearly than she remembered half the expensive places she had lived later. She set her handbag on the table. Willa shifted beneath her ribs. "All right," Mara murmured. "You win." She opened the refrigerator. There was almost nothing inside except bottled water, eggs, yogurt, a container of blueberries and soup Nadine had arranged to have delivered earlier that afternoon. Mara stared at the soup, then at the investment packet notification glowing on her phone. Soup won. For 15 minutes, she refused to think about Dorian Hale, Celine Voss, $1.8 billion, airport traffic assumptions, or the fact that half the people at Teterboro probably believed she had gone home to cry. She ate at the old kitchen table instead. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Dorian. Landed Council received the signed acknowledgement. "Thank you." Mara read it twice. Not because there was anything hidden in it. Because there was nothing hidden in it. No apology. No question about whether she had arrived safely. No mention of Willa. No acknowledgement of Celine's humiliation. Just confirmation that paperwork had been received. Mara placed the phone face down. She finished the soup. Then she went upstairs, changed out of the navy dress she had worn to Teterboro, pulled on loose black pants and one of her mother's old gray cardigans, and returned to the dining room with her laptop. The encrypted packet contained 11 folders. Mara stared at the screen. Of course it does. She opened the first. The North Atlantic Gateway Airport redevelopment was far larger than Hale Meridian alone. The consortium included infrastructure contractors, institutional equity investors, airport service operators, lenders, insurers, engineering firms, and public agency stakeholders. Rourke Family Office had entered the consortium months earlier because Rourke Meridian Aviation operated maintenance and executive service assets throughout the Northeast. The airport redevelopment offered the family office a long-term strategic position in terminal operations, maintenance contracts, hangar infrastructure, and private aviation services. Hale Meridian had joined separately through its infrastructure development division. There was no secret family intervention, no billionaire father quietly arranging rescue capital for his daughter's husband. Mara appreciated the fact more than she expected. If Gideon had engineered this behind her back, she would have withdrawn from the process immediately. Instead, the overlap was legitimate. Complicated, but legitimate. The second folder contained governance documents. Mara hesitated before opening them. For 12 years, she had treated the Ellison Rourke Legacy Trust like a locked cabinet in a room she did not use. She knew what it was. She knew what authority it contained. She simply preferred to live as though the door were closed. The trust existed because Alara had understood Gideon better than anyone. Gideon Rourke was not dishonest. He was not careless. He was not reckless with money. He was, however, almost pathologically convinced that if he could see the correct answer, everyone else would eventually understand why obeying him was sensible. Alara had loved him enough to challenge that instinct. The Legacy Trust had been her answer. Mara scrolled through the charter. Certain extraordinary transactions required approval from both the Rourke Family Office Investment Committee and the Independent Legacy Trust Governance Representative. Infrastructure investments above $1 billion. Material sales of legacy aviation assets. Transactions involving family-controlled companies where conflicts could affect beneficiaries. Mara had inherited the voting seat when she turned 30. She had cast 3 votes in the previous 18 months. All routine. All unanimous, all submitted electronically after Nadine sent her recommendations. None had required Mara to sit in a room and challenge her father. This would. The proposed Rourke Family Office allocation to North Atlantic Gateway was $1.8 billion. Mara read the number again, then the threshold clause, then the authorization section. The conclusion remained the same. Without her affirmative vote, the family office could not commit the capital under the current structure. A knock sounded at the front door.
Mara checked the time. 7:43.
She already knew who it was. Nadine Mercer entered carrying 2 leather briefcases, 1 paper grocery bag, an expression that suggested she had been arguing with people for 12 hours and intended to continue doing so until midnight. "You ate?" she asked. "Soup?" "That barely counts." It had vegetables. Nadine placed the grocery bag on the kitchen island. "Gideon sent food." Mara stared at it. Send it back. It's bread. Then let the bread suffer. Nadine removed her coat. You are remarkably committed to turning every interaction with your father into constitutional warfare. He likes control. So do you. Mara gave her a look. Nadine smiled faintly. Your mother used to make that exact face. The sentence landed softly. Mara looked away. Nadine did not apologize. She had known Alara for nearly 30 years. She was one of the few people allowed to speak about her without Mara feeling invaded. They moved into the dining room. Nadine opened one briefcase and removed a thick binder. This is the clean governance summary. I already read the charter. Of course you did. You sound disappointed. I'm relieved. You used to ignore my emails. I still ignore most of them. I know. Nadine sat across from her. Before we discuss the airport, we need to settle one thing. Mara leaned back. What? Do you understand that Gideon cannot cast your vote? Yes. He cannot remove you. I know. He cannot suspend the trust seat because he dislikes your decision. I know. And he cannot give you instructions that bind you legally. Mara narrowed her eyes. Why are you repeating all of this? Because you still speak about the trust as though it belongs to him. It exists inside his family office. No. Nadine's voice sharpened. It interacts with his family office. It does not belong to him. Mara said nothing. Nadine slid the binder toward her. Alaris had designed the trust specifically because she believed Gideon was too powerful inside the family structure. That sounds like Mom. It was. Did he hate it? For approximately 6 years. Mara almost smiled. Only 6? He matured. I'll alert the newspapers. Nadine did not laugh. Mara. The humor faded. Nadine continued. Your mother did not create this seat so you could have access to more money. I know. She created it because she believed family capital needed someone willing to say no. Mara's gaze fell to the binder. Which is convenient now. No. It's inconvenient now. That's the point. The room grew quiet. Outside, headlights moved slowly along the street. Nadine folded her hands. If you recuse, committee council will decide whether the conflict can be managed without your participation. And if they approve the recusal, another mechanism would be triggered under the charter, likely a special independent committee. So they don't need me. The trust doesn't collapse without you. That's reassuring. But the process becomes slower, more expensive, and more vulnerable to challenge. Mara looked at her. Would you advise recusal? Not yet. Why? Because being married to Dorian creates a conflict. Exactly. Formerly employed by Hale Meridian creates another. Exactly. Nadine held her gaze. But voting against a questionable financing structure can also protect the trust. Mara went still. You've seen the numbers. I've seen concerns. That's not what I asked. Nadine opened the second briefcase. Good, then let's discuss the concerns. She removed several printed charts. Mara recognized the format immediately. Traffic forecast, commercial revenue, debt service coverage, passenger throughput, retail concessions, parking revenue, hotel and terminal leasing. Mara leaned forward. This is current? As of yesterday. Her eyes moved across the assumptions. It took less than 20 seconds. Then she stopped. That's wrong. Nadine watched her. Mara tapped the passenger growth line. This is not the base case. It's labeled base case. I know what it's labeled. She pulled the page closer. The external aviation study never supported this level of growth. How sure are you? Very. From memory? Yes. Nadine's expression remained neutral. Mara looked up. You don't believe me. I believe memory becomes unreliable when someone is emotionally involved. Mara sat back. Then show me the original external study. Nadine handed her another document. Mara scanned the relevant section. There. The independent report presented 3 scenarios. Conservative, base, uppercase. Voss Capital's current base case passenger growth tracked almost exactly with the uppercase scenario. Mara looked at Nadine. They moved it. Yes. Without changing the label. Apparently. That alone doesn't prove misconduct. No. Mara turned to the concession assumptions. Her expression tightened. This is higher too, by approximately 12% over the external commercial estimate. And debt coverage? Nadine handed her another sheet. Mara stared at it. The ratio sat just above the lender threshold. Not comfortably above, not dramatically above, just enough. That's convenient. Nadine nodded. Very. Mara leaned back. Her body suddenly felt heavy. Not from pregnancy, from recognition. She had spent years working in enterprise risk because she was good at finding patterns people hoped were accidental. 3 aggressive assumptions moving in the same direction were not proof of manipulation. But they were rarely innocent enough to ignore. Who built the latest model? Voss Capital's financing team integrated the current equity case. Celine? Her firm. That isn't the same thing. No, Mara rubbed one hand over her forehead. Nadine, if I walk into a committee and accuse Celine without proof, I look exactly like what she already wants me to look like. A jealous wife, estranged wife, technically still wife. Please don't. Nadine's mouth twitched. Mara continued, if I vote no because I think she pushed the model, Dorian will say I'm sabotaging him. Would that matter to me? No. She looked down at the numbers.
To 817 employees?
Maybe. Nadine watched her carefully. You remembered the exact number. Dorian said it today. That's not why. Mara said nothing. She had spent years inside Hale Meridian. She knew project managers by name, analysts, skiers, construction supervisors, payroll staff, people with mortgages and children and medical bills. Dorian's betrayal did not erase them. Nadine pushed the folder closer. We commissioned a preliminary forensic review this afternoon. Mara looked up sharply. You did what? You authorized a deeper review on the phone. I thought you meant after I read the materials. I move quickly. That is not always a virtue. I'm a lawyer. It often is. Mara sighed. What did they find? Version history confirms the major changes were made inside Voss Capital's authorized modeling environment. By whom? Unknown. User credentials? Shared team access in at least 2 stages. Mara frowned, so no direct attribution. Not yet. Metadata? Enough to establish sequence, not intent. Mara stood and walked toward the window. The Hudson was invisible beyond the dark trees, but she could feel its presence. So we know the numbers were moved. Yes. We know the changes benefited lender qualification. Yes. We know Voss Capital made them. Within its environment. But we don't know whether Celine ordered them. Correct. Mara folded her arms. That's not enough. No, if I confront her now, she'll deny it, almost certainly. And Dorian will believe her. Nadine did not answer. Mara looked back. You can say it. He may. The words hurt more because Nadine said them gently. Mara turned back to the glass. Across Massachusetts, Dorian was probably sitting at an investor dinner beside Celine. He would be explaining Hale Meridian's project pipeline. She would be explaining the financing structure. They would look like partners. Maybe that was what they already were. Not merely lovers. A business alliance built over the ruins of the marriage. Mara's phone buzzed again. This time the caller was Gideon Rourke. She stared at the screen. Nadine saw the name. Answer. No, Mara. I spent 4 hours being humiliated by one controlling man today. I've reached quota. Gideon didn't cheat on you. His virtues are dazzling. The phone stopped, then rang again. Nadine raised an eyebrow. Mara answered. What? A pause. Then Gideon said, Good evening to you too. His voice was deeper than Dorian's, slower, with the confidence of a man accustomed to being allowed to finish sentences. Mara closed her eyes. Hi, Dad. I was told you went to Teterboro. I was there. I was also told Hale behaved badly. Mara's eyes opened. Who told you? People. Which people? People who understand discretion. Nobody understands discretion after telling Gideon Rourke anything. Nadine pretended to focus on the documents. Gideon ignored the insult. Are you all right? Mara did not expect the question. That irritated her more. I'm fine. You're 6 months pregnant and your husband is behaving like an idiot. That does not make me medically unstable. I did not say it did. No, you implied it. I asked whether you were all right. Mara pressed her lips together. The room went quiet. Finally, she said, I'm functioning. Gideon exhaled. Your mother used to say that when she was furious. So does Nadine. That woman has been stealing my best lines for 30 years. Nadine, hearing him, said loud, Your best lines were Alara's first. A brief silence followed. Then Gideon said, You're with Mercer. Yes, good. Mara frowned. Why is that good? Because you're reading the airport documents. I haven't said I'm voting. I didn't ask you to. You were about to. No. Mara almost laughed. Dad, I know you don't want anything from my world. I don't. There was no hesitation in her answer. Gideon's voice remained level. Then don't do this for me. Mara looked toward the binder. Do what? The job. She said nothing. Gideon continued. The trust seat exists because your mother believed large decisions needed somebody who wasn't impressed by the size of the check. Mom also believed you were unbearable. She was often correct. That pulled a short laugh from Mara before she could stop it. Gideon heard it. His voice softened slightly. Mara, what? If you think the investment is wrong, vote against it. You make that sound simple. It is simple. No, it isn't. Then explain. Mara looked at Nadine. The attorney quietly gathered several pages and moved toward the kitchen, giving her privacy. Hale Meridian has more than 800 employees, Mar said. Contractors are already exposed. If the consortium falls apart, this doesn't just hurt Dorian.
Correct.
And Rourke Meridian benefits strategically if the project proceeds.
Correct.
And I'm still married to the CEO. For the moment, Mara's mouth tightened.
Helpful. You wanted honesty. I wanted a father.
That came out before she could stop it. Silence filled the line. A different kind of silence than Dorian's. Gideon did not dodge. When he finally spoke, His voice had lost its business tone. I know. Mara looked down. He continued. I was not very good at that after your mother died. No. I thought keeping you close meant keeping you safe. You tried to choose my school, my work, my apartment, my friends. I know. You had security follow me. You were 20. I was 21. That does not improve my argument. Mara leaned against the window frame. Why didn't you stop the trust? I couldn't. You're Gideon Rourke. I'm aware. You found ways around everything else. Not that. Mara's expression changed. What do you mean? Your mother designed it so I couldn't. Mara straightened. She told me you hated it. I did. How much? For years. Why? Why? Because she was right.
Mara stared into the dark glass. Gideon continued.
Alara believed I had too much influence over the family office. She believed if every important decision eventually came back to me, then the system was weak no matter how competent I thought I was. That sounds like her. It was infuriating. Mara smiled faintly. I can imagine. She created a structure that would survive her. His voice changed again. Not grief exactly, something older. She chose you. Mara swallowed. I didn't ask for it. I know. I stayed away from the company for a reason. I know that too. Then why are you calling? To tell you the vote is yours. Mara frowned. That's all? No, of course not. I also want you to stop treating your mother's decision like it was a chain. Mara's eyes narrowed. You don't get to tell me how to feel about Mom. No. But I get to tell you what she told me. Mara went still. What? Gideon paused. She said one day you would confuse independence with isolation. Mara said nothing. She said you would think needing nobody was the same as belonging to yourself. The words struck with uncomfortable precision. Mara looked toward the table where Nadine had left the investment binder open. What else did she say? That if I tried to use the trust to pull you back into the family business, she would come back from the dead specifically to make my life unpleasant. Despite herself, Mara laughed. That sounds even more like her. Yes, a pause. Then Gideon said, you don't have to come back to Rourke Meridian. I'm not. I didn't ask you to. You were thinking it. I am always thinking it. At least you're honest. That's the family tradition. Slowly, Mara closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the tension in her shoulders had eased. Not disappeared, but shifted.
Dad? Yes. Would you vote for the airport investment?
Gideon did not answer immediately. Good. If he had, Mara would have known the call was manipulation. Finally, he said, under the current structure, yes. I have concerns about Voss, among other things. Would you vote no? I'm not telling you. Mara almost smiled. Why? Because she designed the trust so that I couldn't. The line settled between them, Mara understood. Not legally this time. Emotionally, Alara had left her power without instructions, responsibility without obedience. It was a gift Mara had mistaken for a burden. I need to go, Gideon said. Mara glanced at the time. Where? Seattle. Tonight, a maintenance acquisition. You're 67. I remain aware. Sleep occasionally. I have a staff for that. That isn't how sleep works. It should be. Mara shook her head. Good night, Dad? Mara. What? I'm sorry about Hale. Her throat tightened. Gideon added, not because he embarrassed the family, because he hurt my daughter. Mara looked down. Good night. She ended the call before her voice could betray her. Nadine returned carrying 2 mugs of tea. You survived. Barely. How was Gideon? Still Gideon. Tragic. Mara sat again. For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Then Mara reopened the model. Show me the version history. Nadine pushed the forensic summary toward her. Mara studied it carefully. Timestamp by timestamp. Revision by revision. Passenger assumptions moved first. Then concessions. Then debt coverage improved. The changes were subtle enough that someone reading only the final model might accept them. But Mara had seen the earlier case. She knew what to compare. Who has authority to force Voss Capital to disclose model certifications, she asked. Nadine tilted her head. The consortium can request supporting documentation. That's not what I asked. You want a named individual to certify? Yes. Why? Because right now everyone can hide behind the team. Nadine's eyes sharpened. Mara continued. If the model is valid, whoever leads the financing should be willing to stand behind it personally, Celine. Probably. And if she refuses, then we learn something. Nadine leaned back. That is not a vote. No, it sounds like preparation for one. Mara ignored the comment. Can the Legacy Trust request a formal validation as a condition of considering the allocation? Yes. Without accusing anyone? Yes. Then do it. Nadine picked up a pen. Independent validation of all material base case assumptions, especially passenger growth, concession revenue, and debt service coverage. Do you want the external traffic study incorporated by reference? Yes. And model version history? Yes. Nadine wrote quickly. Anything else? Mara looked at the screen. The numbers seemed almost calm there. That was what financial risk often looked like before it became disaster. Clean columns. Professional formatting. A few percentages moved in the favorable direction. Nobody screaming, nobody bleeding, just optimism made expensive. Not yet, Mara said. Nadine looked up. You're still considering recusal? Yes. Do you want my opinion? I assume I'm getting it whether I want it or not. Nadine smiled. Then her expression turned serious. If the conflict makes it impossible for you to exercise independent judgment, recuse. Mara waited. But if you are considering recusal because you are afraid Dorian will think you're vindictive, that is not governance. Mara looked away. Nadine continued. And if you recuse because you are afraid Gideon will think you've returned to the family, that is not independence either. Mara's gaze returned to hers. So what is doing the work? A long silence followed. Mara looked toward the old pantry door. The dent was still there. Evidence that she had once been ate. Evidence that her mother had believed not everything damaged needed to be erased. Mara touched the edge of the investment binder. I want the deeper forensic review. Nadine nodded. I'll authorize it. And no contact with Hale Meridian yet. Agreed. No warning, Dorian. Nadine studied her. You're protecting the process. From Dorian? From everyone. Nadine nodded once. That sounds like Elara. Mara looked down. No, her hand rested over Willa. It sounds like me. Across the dining table, Nadine's expression softened. Mara reopened the current model. This time she did not look at it as Dorian Hale's wife. She did not look at it as Gideon Rourke's daughter. She looked at it as the woman whose name appeared on a governance seat created long before Dorian ever knew her. Page by page, she began marking questions. At 11:17 that night, Nadine left. At 11:36, Mara was still reading. At midnight, she found another discrepancy buried in the commercial assumptions. At 12:22, she sent Nadine one final message. Authorize full forensic version analysis. Include VOS source files where legally available. Nadine replied almost immediately. Done. Mara stared at the word. For 12 years, the legacy trust had existed in her life like an emergency exit she hoped never to use. That night, she stopped pretending the door was not there. She had not decided how she would vote. She had not decided whether Dorian deserved saving. And she had certainly not decided whether Gideon's world had any place in the future she wanted. But she had decided one thing. If $1.8 billion moved because of her signature, she would know exactly what she was signing. For the first time since inheriting her mother's seat, Mara did not merely receive the responsibility. She exercised it. By Tuesday morning, the airport financing had stopped behaving like a deal and started behaving like a warning. Dorian knew it before anyone said it directly. The first sign came at 6:45, when Hale Meridian's senior lender requested additional collateral language on guarantees that had already been negotiated. The second came 40 minutes later, when the project insurer asked for a written explanation of the revised debt service coverage assumptions. The third came before 9, when a pension fund that had spent 2 weeks describing itself as fully aligned suddenly postponed its investment committee vote. By 10:15, Dorian was standing at the end of Hale Meridian's 32nd floor conference room, staring at a screen filled with numbers that looked almost impossibly neat. That bothered him. Bad situations rarely looked bad at first. They looked organized. They arrived in spreadsheets. They wore clean formatting. They smiled politely while asking for one more guarantee. Rowan Pike sat halfway down the table with his laptop open. Celine Voss stood near the glass wall overlooking Midtown, one hand wrapped around a paper coffee cup, as composed as if the morning had gone exactly as planned. Dorian looked at the projected passenger numbers again. Why is the insurer asking about traffic assumptions now? Rowan answered first. They're stress testing the latest case. They already stress tested the project. That was before the revised financing package. Dorian's eyes moved to Celine. And the pension fund? Celine took a slow sip of coffee. Routine investment committee caution. That's not an answer. It is the answer. No. It's language people use when they don't want to say what's wrong. Celine lowered the cup. Her expression cooled slightly. Dorian, investors get nervous when deadlines tighten. That doesn't mean the model is broken. He heard Mara's voice instantly. Studies don't change because you need them to. He hated that the memory came so clearly. Dorian turned back to Rowan. Pull up the original external traffic study. Rowan hesitated. Celine noticed. So now we're reopening everything? I asked for a document. Because Mara planted doubt in your head at the terminal? Dorian looked at her. Don't. Celine's eyes narrowed. You brought her warning into a financing meeting. I brought lender questions into a financing meeting. Same thing, apparently. Rowan shifted in his chair. Dorian ignored him. Opened the study. Rowan did. A chart appeared.
Base case, uppercase, conservative case.
Dorian studied the growth rates. Then he looked at the current model. The difference was not dramatic. That made it worse. The current passenger assumptions track closely with the external study's uppercase. Not exactly, but close enough that Dorian felt a pressure begin behind his eyes. What changed? He asked. Rowan cleared his throat. Commercial expectations improved after the terminal expansion plan. That's not passenger traffic. It affects capture rates, not the same thing. Celine stepped away from the window. You're blending separate assumptions. Dorian looked at her. I'm trying to understand why our base case looks like somebody else's upside case. Celine's face remained calm. Because the original external study didn't fully account for the expanded premium terminal footprint, revised concession strategy, or the current airline discussions. Which airline discussions? The ones under confidentiality. That convenient. Celine's expression sharpened. Careful. Dorian leaned both hands against the table. No, you be careful. Silence fell across the room. Rowan looked down. Celine did not. Dorian continued. My lender asks for new collateral language. The insurer questions coverage. A pension fund delays its vote. All before 10 in the morning. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's weather. Celine's jaw tightened. You think I pushed the model dishonestly? I asked what changed, and I answered. You gave me a story. That's what investment assumptions are, Dorian. A reasoned story about the future. No, they're supposed to be supportable. Celine's eyes held his. For a moment, Dorian saw something he had previously mistaken for confidence. Control. Celine liked rooms where everyone else was running out of options. She was strongest when fear narrowed other people's choices. That realization should have come earlier. Instead, Dorian had once found it attractive. He straightened. Get me a reconciliation between the external traffic study and the current base case. Rowan nodded. And concession revenue, another nod. And every change to debt service coverage since the original Hale Meridian model. Celine folded her arms. You're overreacting, maybe. Because Mara embarrassed you. Dorian stared at her. There it was. Not analysis. Not finance. Mara. Celine continued. She spent years inside your company. She knows exactly where to apply pressure. Now she's angry, pregnant, and losing the marriage. You really think she wouldn't use old contacts to make investors nervous? Dorian felt something harden inside him. Mara can hate me. Celine paused. He continued. She can hate you too. That seems likely. But she would not deliberately destroy 800 jobs just to make me hurt. Celine's expression changed. Not much, but enough she'd expected him to agree. Dorian realized that. For the first time in months, he heard the cruelty hidden inside the version of Mara Celine kept presenting to him. Jealous, emotional, vindictive, conveniently irrational. A woman whose warnings could always be dismissed because her husband had betrayed her. Dorian had accepted too much of that framing because it made his own choices easier to live with. He looked at Rowan. I want the reconciliation by noon. Then he walked out. Celine followed him into the hallway. Dorian, he kept moving. Dorian. He stopped near the elevators. What? Celine lowered her voice. You do not get to treat me like some outside advisor every time pressure rises. What does that mean? It means you know exactly what I've put into this. The deal? You. The word landed between them. Dorian looked away. Wrong place, wrong time. But that had never stopped either of them before. Celine stepped closer. I stood beside you when lenders started tightening. I brought Voss into a structure nobody else wanted to touch. I put my reputation behind Hale Meridian. And I'm asking questions about the model. You're asking because your wife asked them first. Estranged wife. Celine's mouth tightened. Fine. Dorian rubbed a hand over his jaw. I should have asked sooner. Celine stared at him. That's what this is? I don't know yet. He pressed the elevator button. Celine said, you're letting guilt interfere with judgment. Dorian turned. No. I let fear interfere with judgment. The elevator arrived. He stepped inside before Celine could answer. Across the Hudson, Mara was looking at the same numbers. Not the same file. Not yet. Nadine had sent the deeper forensic request Monday night, and by Tuesday afternoon, the preliminary output was sitting on Mara's dining table beside a cup of tea she had forgotten to drink. She read the version history twice, then a third time. Passenger growth changed first, not all at once. In increments, a modest upward adjustment, then another, then a reclassification of one scenario label. Concession revenue moved later. Again, not dramatically, just enough. Finally, the debt service coverage ratio crossed the lender threshold by a margin so narrow it almost looked designed to avoid attention. Mara stared at the screen. Nadine sat across from her. Well? Mara did not answer immediately. She scrolled backward. Version 12. Nadine looked down at her printout. What about it? Passenger growth changes. Correct. Version 15. Concessions. And version 17. Coverage. Mara looked up. They're not independent. Nadine waited. Mara turned the laptop around. If passenger traffic rises, airport retail revenue rises. If retail revenue rises, coverage improves. But look at the timing. Nadine studied the screen. They adjusted commercial revenue after the traffic change.
Yes, that's logical, not by itself.
Mara pointed lower. Now look at this. A note in the underlying model referenced the independent traffic study. Uppercase scenario. Mara tapped it. The external report specifically treats this as upside, not base. So the final model is aggressive. Yes, still not proof of misconduct. No. Mara leaned back. That's the problem. Nadine closed one folder. What do you need? Intent. Hard to prove. Or certification. Nadine looked at her. Mara continued. If Voss Capital wants the consortium to rely on the model, someone senior should be willing to certify that the material assumptions are supportable by the external studies. Nadine's eyes sharpened. You want Celine's signature. I want accountability. Same thing in this case. Mara did not answer. Nadine tapped a pen against the table. The consortium can require sponsor certification as part of final diligence. Would it be unusual? Not especially. Would it look like I'm targeting her? If the requirement applies to every lead financial sponsor, no. Mara nodded slowly. Do it that way. Nadine studied her for several seconds. You've thought this through. I used to do this for a living. No. You used to identify risk. Mara looked at her. Nadine continued. This is strategy. Mara placed one hand over Willa. Maybe I'm tired of finding problems after everyone else has already decided what they want to believe. Nadine's expression softened. Then Mara's phone lit up. Dorian. She stared at the name. Nadine said nothing. The phone stopped. Then rang again. Mara answered. What? A beat of silence. Dorian said, You always answer like you're expecting a subpoena. Depends who's calling. I need to ask you something. Mara looked toward Nadine. About? The airport model. Nadine's eyebrows rose. Mara stood and walked toward the window. What about it? Dorian's voice was controlled, but she heard strain beneath it. You said the passenger assumptions changed. They did. How did you know? I remembered the earlier model. You said you haven't seen the current one. I hadn't when we spoke. Another pause. Dorian caught that immediately. Haven't? Mara closed her eyes. Careful. What do you want, Dorian? The original base case traffic number. You have your own records. I know. Then use them. I did. Mara said nothing. Dorian continued. You were right. The words surprised her, not because she wanted them. Because Dorian Hale hated saying them before he understood exactly how much they might cost. About what? The passenger case. Mara looked out at the trees. Only that silence. Then Dorian said concessions too. Mara's jaw tightened. And coverage. Another silence. Longer. Also moved. Mara looked back toward Nadine. Nadine could read the answer from her face. Dorian said, I'm having the changes reconciled. Good. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? I don't know. Then why did you call? His voice sharpened. Because 4 months ago you worked on this model. And now I don't work for you. I know that, do you, Mara? She closed her eyes for a second. There was something dangerous about hearing his voice like this. Not romantic danger. Familiarity, the old rhythm, problem, question. Mara finds the weak point. Dorian makes a decision. Once, they had been good together that way. Before he started hiding hotel receipts. Before she started hiding entire pieces of herself. Dorian said, Did you contact any of our lenders? No. Insurers? No. Pension funds? No. Anyone inside the consortium? Mara paused. That pause was enough. Dorian heard it. Who? I'm not discussing that. His voice changed. Mara, I said no. You're involved. I have obligations. What obligations? She almost answered, then stopped. Not over the phone. Not like this. You should be asking Celine why the numbers moved. I am. Good. She says the revised assumptions reflect updated commercial conditions. Then ask her to support them. I am. Then we're done. Dorian exhaled. Are you trying to stop the financing? Mara looked through the darkened window. If the financing is sound, nobody needs to stop it. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He was silent. Then you really don't trust her. Mara gave a short, humorless laugh. She slept with my husband, I mean professionally. So do I. Dorian said nothing. Mara felt a sharp pressure behind her eyes. She hated that the simplest truth still had the power to hurt. She lowered her voice. Dorian, whatever you think this is, don't mistake me for someone trying to punish you. What is it then?
Risk. You always say that like it's a person. Sometimes it behaves like one. He almost laughed.
Almost. She heard it in the breath. Then the moment vanished. Fine, he said. I'll handle it. Mara's expression hardened. That sentence is part of your problem. What does that mean? You think handling something means controlling it. And you don't? The question landed more accurately than she wanted. Mara looked away. No, she said after a moment. I do too. Dorian went quiet. For 1 second, neither of them had a weapon. Only truth. Then Mara ended the call. Nadine was still watching her. You told him too much. I know. You also told him almost nothing. I know. Efficient. Mara sat back down. Draft the certification requirement. Nadine nodded. And make it apply to everyone. Already assumed. Good. By Thursday, the consortium adopted the requirement. Every lead financial sponsor would be required to certify that the material assumptions in its final model were supportable by referenced external studies and diligence materials. Refusal meant loss of preferred partner status. The rule looked procedural, neutral, boring. Exactly how Mara wanted it. Celine accepted within 2 hours. Her reply was brief. Voss Capital would comply. Mara read the confirmation and felt something cold settle in her stomach. She didn't hesitate, Nadine said. No. Does that concern you? Yes. Why? Because either the model is cleaner than I think, Mara looked at the email again, or she thinks nobody can prove otherwise. That same afternoon, Dorian left Hale Meridian earlier than usual. He did not go to Celine's apartment. He did not go home. There was barely a home to go to now. Instead, he drove north. The decision was impulsive enough that he nearly turned around twice. He did not. The Irvington house appeared behind old trees and a low stone wall. Dorian had been there before, years ago. Before the marriage. Before Hale Meridian had offices in 3 states. Before Mara stopped talking about Gideon entirely. He parked at the curb. As he stepped out, the front door opened. Nadine Mercer emerged carrying a leather briefcase. She stopped when she saw him. Dorian stopped too. Recognition came instantly. Nadine. Dorian, her voice revealed nothing. He looked toward the house. You represent Mara's divorce interests, among other things. That's not what I asked. No, it's what I answered. She walked toward her car. Dorian watched her. Something bothered him. Not because Mara had hired Nadine, because Nadine's name had appeared elsewhere recently. Rourke Meridian.
Trust Governance Investment Council.
Dorian took out his phone before he even returned to the car. 10 minutes later, he found the first reference. Mercer and Klein had advised the Rourke family office on governance matters. That was public. 20 minutes later, parked 2 blocks from Mara's house, he found another. Ellison Rourke Legacy Trust. Most details were private. But an old foundation governance filing listed a beneficiary representative.
Mara Ellison Rourke.
Dorian stared at the name. He knew Mara was Gideon's daughter. That was not the shock. The word beneath her name was beneficiary representative. He searched again. Another filing. Then another reference. Enough to tell him the trust was active. Not enough to tell him what authority it carried. Dorian looked back toward the house. For years, Mara had told him she wanted nothing from Gideon. No money, no company role, no position inside Rourke Meridian. Dorian had believed that meant separation. Maybe it had, but not complete separation. He got out of the car. Mara opened the door before he knocked twice. Her expression changed when she saw him. What are you doing here? I saw Nadine. Mara's face became still. So? She represents the Rourke family office. She represents a lot of people. And the Ellison Rourke Legacy Trust. Mara said nothing. Dorian's heartbeat accelerated. He hated that he could feel it. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That you still had a governance role inside that family. Mara looked at him for several seconds. Then she stepped outside and closed the door behind her. Because for most of my adult life, I tried not to use it. That's not the same as not having it. I know, his voice tightened. You let me believe you were completely separate from Rourke. I am separate from my father's company. But not the family office. Not entirely. That's a pretty important distinction. Yes, Dorian stared at her. Were you ever going to tell me? Mara's eyes hardened. Were you ever going to tell me you were sleeping with Celine? The answer hit like a door slammed in a silent room. Dorian looked away. Mara continued. We both kept things that changed the marriage. That doesn't make them equal. I didn't say it did. He looked back at her. Do you have a vote? Mara did not answer. Dorian stepped closer. Mara, she held his gaze. Yes. The word landed harder than he expected. How much does it matter? That depends on the transaction. This transaction. Mara said nothing. Dorian's jaw tightened. You're reviewing North Atlantic. Yes. Through the trust? Yes. And you didn't think I needed to know? You told me to stay out of your financing. That was before I knew you were inside the investor structure. I am not inside your company. You know what I mean? Yes, Mara said. I usually do. The phrase struck him because she had used it before. At Teterboro. A different sentence. The same distance. Dorian ran one hand through his hair. Are you going to vote against Hale Meridian? Mara's expression changed, not anger. Something colder. If I wanted revenge, I would let Celine's financing close. Dorian stared at her. What does that mean? It means the current structure may keep Hale Meridian alive long enough to make the next problem worse. You don't know that. I know leverage. So does Celine. Yes. The way Mara said it made his stomach tighten. Dorian stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" Mara looked at him. For a moment, he saw exhaustion behind her eyes. Pregnancy, divorce, work, family, all of it. Then the exhaustion disappeared behind something firmer. "Nothing." Dorian frowned. Mara continued. "That's what you still don't understand." The words stopped him. She opened the door. "I have work to do, Mara." She looked back. "Ask Celine to explain the model against the external traffic study." Dorian's expression tightened. "And if she can, then you'll have your answer. And if she can't?" Mara looked at him for one long second. "Then you'll have a different one." She went inside. Dorian stood on the porch after the door closed. His phone vibrated. An email. He opened it. North Atlantic Gateway Consortium Final Investment Committee notice. He read the date. Then the location. Rourke Meridian Aviation Executive Terminal, Teterboro, New Jersey. Dorian stared at the screen. For the first time, the problem was no longer that Mara might be connected to the deal. The problem was that he had no idea how much power she actually held inside it. The final investment committee meeting began without Mara. Dorian noticed immediately. He had arrived at Rourke Meridian Aviation's executive terminal 20 minutes early, carrying a leather folio he had opened 3 times without reading a single page. The terminal looked nothing like the public side of Teterboro. There were no departure boards, no crowded gates, no voices echoing beneath fluorescent lights. Everything here was quiet by design. Dark wood, muted brass, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the runway. A private conference room behind smoked glass. And everywhere, subtle versions of the Rourke Meridian Silver Falcon. Dorian had seen that symbol for years. He had never imagined it could belong to Mara, too. Not officially. Not in any way that mattered to him. That assumption now felt embarrassingly fragile. Celine entered beside Rowan Pike carrying 2 binders and wearing the same composed expression she brought into every room where money needed to be persuaded. She looked at Dorian. "You're early. So are you. I like knowing what the room looks like before everyone else starts pretending they own it." Dorian did not smile. Celine noticed. "You're still thinking about Irvington. I'm thinking about the meeting." "No. You're thinking about Mara." Dorian closed the folio. "You don't know what I'm thinking." Celine set her binders on the table. "I know exactly what you're thinking. You found out she has some trust position, and now you're rewriting the last 6 years of your marriage. I'm trying to understand what authority she has. Probably less than she wants you to believe." Dorian looked at her. "You sure?" Celine gave a soft laugh. "She spent 12 years staying away from her father's empire. You think she suddenly became a master investor because you filed for divorce? That's not what I said." "No, but it's what she wants you to think." Dorian turned toward the windows. Several aircraft sat motionless beyond the glass. Celine stepped closer. "She's bluffing." Dorian said nothing. "She has nothing that matters in this room." The sentence landed badly, maybe because he had heard a version of it before. Maybe because Celine seemed so certain. Dorian looked back at her. "You said that at the terminal too." Celine's expression remained calm, and I was right. "No," Dorian said, "you were cruel." Celine's face changed, just slightly. "You're defending her now?" "I'm stating a fact." "Interesting timing." Dorian lowered his voice. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Turn every question into Mara." Celine folded her arms. She already did that when she inserted herself into the financing. She has a governance role, apparently. "You knew Mercer represented Rourke interests. I know a lot of lawyers who represent wealthy families. Did you know Mara had a trust seat?" Celine paused. "Not long." But Dorian saw it. "No."
"You're sure?"
Her eyes cooled. "Yes." Before he could answer, the conference room doors opened. Gideon Rourke entered with 3 members of the Family Office Investment Committee and 2 outside advisors. Dorian recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Gideon Rourke had spent 4 decades building an aviation and infrastructure empire that rarely needed public markets, and therefore answered to fewer people than most companies of its size. He was 67, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and carried authority without needing to display it. Dorian had met him only twice during his marriage to Mara. Both times had been brief. Both times had been cold. Gideon nodded toward him. "Dorian, Mr. Rourke, Gideon is fine." It had not been fine 6 years ago. Dorian noticed that too. Gideon then looked at Celine. "Miss Voss, Mr. Rourke." No invitation to use Gideon, Celine noticed. The committee members took their seats. Dorian scanned the room. One chair remained empty. A small placard rested in front of it. Ellison Rourke Legacy Trust. Dorian stared at the name. Celine followed his gaze. Her mouth tightened. A committee attorney began arranging documents. "Miss Ellison Rourke is in transit," she said. "We'll wait a few minutes before formal opening." Celine leaned toward Dorian. "In transit from where?" He did not answer. A low engine sound rose beyond the glass. Several people turned. A Gulfstream taxied toward the private apron. White fuselage, silver tail, dark falcon. The aircraft rolled to a stop beneath the Rourke Meridian signage. Dorian stood completely still. The door opened. Gideon remained seated. That was the first thing Dorian noticed. He had expected the arrival to be about him. Instead, Gideon barely looked outside. Nadine Mercer descended first. Then Mara appeared. She stepped through the aircraft doorway carrying a dark investment binder in one hand. No dramatic entrance, no bodyguards surrounding her, no attempt to perform wealth. She wore a simple deep blue maternity dress beneath a pale coat, her dark hair pulled back, her posture steady despite the visible weight of pregnancy. Dorian forgot to breathe for a second. He had seen Mara in airport terminals before. On vacations, business trips, family obligations. He had seen her refuse private cars Gideon offered, refuse company aircraft, refuse invitations to work events. This was different. She was not stepping out of Gideon's plane as his daughter. She was arriving for work. Not behind. Not guiding her. Beside her. Celine stared. For the first time since Dorian had known her, she looked genuinely uncertain. Mara entered the conference room, her eyes met Dorian's. No surprise, no satisfaction. She looked at him the way she might look at a difficult line in a report. Something to account for, not something to fear. Then she took the empty seat. Gideon did not move closer to her. He did not whisper instructions. He did not hand her documents. Nadine placed a folder beside Mara and sat along the side wall. The committee attorney stood. Before we begin, I want to clarify governance requirements for today's extraordinary allocation review. Celine glanced toward Rowan. The attorney continued. The proposed $1.8 billion infrastructure commitment by Rourke Family Office exceeds the extraordinary investment threshold established under the Ellison Rourke Legacy Trust Charter. Dorian's stomach tightened. Under that charter, the investment cannot proceed without the affirmative vote of the designated Legacy Trust representative. She looked toward Mara. Ms. Mara Ellison Rourke currently holds that authority. Silence. Dorian stared at Mara. He had expected influence. Advisory power, maybe. A committee seat. He had not expected this. $1.8 billion. No Mara, no vote. Celine leaned forward.
I assume Conflict Counsel has reviewed this.
Mara looked at her.
Yes, Celine continued. Because Miss...
Rourke is still legally married to Mr. Hale. Separated, Mara said. Still married, yes, and previously employed by Hale Meridian. Yes, and now voting on whether capital goes into her husband's company. Mara's expression did not change, which is why my relationship, employment history, economic interests, and separation are disclosed to committee counsel. Celine gave a small smile. Disclosure does not eliminate conflict. No, that answer caught her off guard. Mara continued. If counsel determines recusal is required, I will comply. Gideon watched without speaking. Dorian realized something then. No one was protecting Mara from the conflict. Not Gideon, not Nadine, not the committee. She had chosen to sit inside it anyway. The attorney nodded. Counsel's current determination is that participation may proceed subject to full disclosure and independent committee oversight. Celine looked dissatisfied. The committee chair moved forward. Let's begin with the financing model. Mara opened her binder. Before allocation discussion, I want the sponsor certification addressed. Celine turned toward her. We already submitted it. Yes. Mara looked at Rowan. Voss Capital is prepared to certify that the material assumptions in its submitted base case are supportable by underlying external studies and diligence materials. Rowan glanced toward Celine. Celine answered. Yes. Mara slid a document across the table. Then I need the managing partner responsible for the financing structure to sign personally. Celine looked at the page. You're asking for individual certification. I'm asking for accountability. This applies to every sponsor? Yes. The committee attorney confirmed it. Celine picked up the pen. Dorian watched her. For the first time since the Hale Meridian crisis began, he wanted her to hesitate. Celine signed. Then she placed the pen down. Done. Mara nodded. Thank you. Her calm made Dorian more uneasy than anger would have. She opened another section of the binder. The forensic review identified 3 material changes from the earlier Hale Meridian base case. Celine leaned back. Scenario development is not misconduct, I agree. Mara turned one page. Passenger growth moved toward the uppercase assumptions in the external aviation study. Another page. Concession revenue increased beyond the independent commercial estimate. Another. The resulting debt service coverage ratio moved above the lender threshold. Celine smiled faintly. You're describing optimization. I'm describing a sequence. Same thing. No. The room went quiet. Mara slid the independent traffic study onto the screen. A highlighted note appeared. The external study specifically states that uppercase passenger assumptions should not be used as a base underwriting case without additional supporting evidence. Celine said, Voss Capital had additional commercial information. Then identify it. Confidential airline discussions. Documented?
Yes, provided to the committee under restricted review.
Mara looked toward the committee council. Council said, we received summaries, not underlying commitments. Celine's jaw tightened. Mara looked back at her. So you certified the assumptions as supportable? I did. Using information the committee cannot independently verify. Using professional judgment. Mara nodded once. That may be true. Celine's eyes narrowed. Dorian could see her recalculating. Mara was not accusing. That made it harder to fight. Celine said, you clearly came here intending to reject the financing. No. You think anyone believes that? Mara looked at Dorian, then back at Celine. If I wanted to reject Hale Meridian, I wouldn't be asking whether the structure can be repaired. Dorian felt everyone's attention shift. Mara turned to him. Did you approve the specific passenger, concession, and coverage assumptions in the current base case? The question hit harder than he expected. Celine looked at him instantly. Rowan stopped typing. Dorian knew what Celine wanted, a simple yes. Management approval, shared responsibility, protection, and perhaps the deal survived. Dorian looked at the screen. He remembered Mara at Teterboro, the way he had dismissed her. He remembered Rowan hesitating when asked for the external study. He remembered Celine saying he was overreacting. He remembered himself allowing every shortcut because time was running out. Mara repeated the question. Dorian? He looked at her. No. Celine's head turned. Dorian continued before fear could change the answer. I approved moving forward with the financing process. I did not approve those specific assumptions. Celine's voice sharpened. That's not an accurate characterization. Dorian looked at her. It is. You knew the model was being revised. Yes. You knew we were presenting an enhanced commercial case. Yes. Then don't pretend you were excluded. I'm not. He turned toward the committee. I knew the process was moving faster than it should have, and I let it continue. The admission felt like swallowing broken glass. But once said, it was strangely clean. Mara did not look relieved. She did not thank him. She simply wrote something in the margin of her binder. Then Hale Meridian Management Oversight also needs independent review, she said. Dorian felt the words land. No rescue, no reward for finally telling the truth. Just consequence. The committee chair nodded. Noted. Celine stared at Mara. So that's the game. Mara looked up. What game? You get to punish him and me while pretending this is governance. Mara's expression became almost impossibly still. No. Celine leaned forward.
You want revenge? If I wanted revenge, I would let your financing close.
The room went silent. Celine's face changed. Mara continued. I would let Hale Meridian accept an aggressive capital structure. I would let leverage increase. I would let the weak assumptions become someone else's problem 2 years from now. She closed the binder. That would be revenge. Then she looked toward the committee chair. My vote is to suspend the Rourke family office commitment pending independent audit and restructuring. Dorian's chest tightened. Mara continued. I also support suspension of Voss Capital's preferred partner status until the assumptions are independently verified. Celine stood. That is absurd. The committee chair raised a hand. Sit down, Ms. Voss. Celine did not. Her face had lost the polished calm. You think this room won't see what she's doing? Mara remained seated. Celine looked directly at her. You want transparency? Yes. Fine. She opened her phone. Dorian felt something shift. Celine said, then let's be transparent. Mara's eyes narrowed. Celine turned the screen toward her. I have copies of correspondence between you and Gideon discussing your estrangement, divorce scheduling, your pregnancy appointments, messages showing you avoided this family for years. Dorian stood. Where did you get that? Celine ignored him. She looked at Mara. I released this. And every reporter outside New York starts asking the same question. Mara said nothing. Did the pregnant billionaire heiress freeze financing because the numbers were wrong? Celine smiled coldly. Or because the man who left her was sleeping with the woman who arranged it? Dorian's face hardened. Celine. She turned on him. Don't. Then back to Mara. Conflict disclosure won't stop the story. Mara's expression remained controlled, but Dorian saw her fingers tighten around the edge of the binder. For the first time that day, Celine had found something that hurt. Not money. Exposure. The thing Mara had spent years avoiding. Gideon finally spoke. Mara. She looked at him. We can withdraw the family office. The room quieted. Gideon continued. Another investor can step in. The project survives or it doesn't. But you do not have to put your private life on display for this. Mara stared at him. Dorian realized what Gideon was offering. Escape. The most powerful man in the room was willing to walk away from a strategic investment to protect his daughter. Celine heard it too. Her expression steadied. She thought she had won. Mara looked down at the binder, then at the silver falcon embossed on its cover. However, for years that symbol had represented everything she had run from. Family power, expectation, control, the possibility that no one would ever know where Mara ended and Gideon Rourke began. Now Celine was offering her the same bargain Mara had made with herself for 12 years. Hide, disappear, protect the private life. Let someone else handle the consequences. Mara looked at Nadine. Do we have a complete conflict package ready? Nadine studied her carefully. Yes. Marriage? Yes. Prior Hale employment? Yes. Trust interest? Yes. Everything relevant? Yes. Gideon said, Mara, you don't have to. She looked at him. I know. Then she turned to Nadine. Release the full conflict disclosure. Celine's smile disappeared. Nadine did not move immediately. You're certain? Mara's voice was quiet. Every page. The committee chair leaned forward. Dorian stared at his wife, estranged wife, soon ex-wife, and for the first time he understood that the secret Mara had protected was not simply power. It was vulnerability. She had spent years believing that if nobody saw the Rourke part of her life, nobody could use it against her. Celine had just tried. Mara chose to expose it herself instead. Nadine gathered the disclosure package. I'll file it with committee counsel and authorize release to relevant counterparties. Mara nodded. Outside the terminal windows, 2 black SUVs pulled near the security entrance. Then another. The committee attorney checked her phone. Press inquiries have started. Celine sat slowly. Dorian looked toward Mara. She did not look back. Her gaze remained on the documents in front of her. The $1.8 billion commitment was frozen. Voss Capital's status was suspended. Hale Meridian's management oversight was now subject to review. And by the end of the day, Mara's marriage, trust authority, employment history, and family conflict could all become public. The reveal had happened. But nobody in the room had won. Not yet. Mara closed the binder. Let them see everything. 2 days after the Teterboro meeting, Celine Voss arrived at Mercer & Klein with 2 attorneys, 1 public relations advisor, and the unmistakable posture of a woman who still believed every disaster could be negotiated if the room was expensive enough. Mara was already seated. Nadine sat beside her. No Gideon, no Dorian, that was deliberate. Celine placed a slim folder on the conference table. Voss Capital is prepared to withdraw voluntarily from the North Atlantic financing. Mara looked at her. Under what condition? Celine smiled faintly. You issue a statement saying the modeling dispute involved reasonable differences in commercial judgment. No accusation of manipulation, no implication of misconduct. Mara leaned back. So you leave quietly and I help you keep your reputation. I'm offering everyone a clean exit. No, Celine's smile disappeared. You haven't even heard the full proposal. I heard the part that matters. Celine's attorney started to speak. Celine stopped him with one hand. Then she looked directly at Mara. You spent years hiding the trust from your husband. You walked away from your father's company and pretended none of that power existed. Now suddenly you want to lecture everyone about disclosure. Mara held her gaze. I hid part of my life from my husband. Celine blinked, clearly expecting denial. Mara continued. That was wrong. Nadine said nothing. Mara leaned forward. It still doesn't make your financial model honest. Celine's jaw tightened. The model was built by a team. Then the team records should help you. They do. Good. Nadine opened the audit file. The evidence was not one dramatic email. It was better than that. It was a sequence. First, a Voss analyst had warned Celine and Rowan Pike that the uppercase passenger assumptions were not supported for base case underwriting by the independent traffic study. Then Rowan had asked whether the team should revert to the conservative case. Celine had replied, use the uppercase. We need the coverage ratio above the lender threshold. Later, when the revised model still failed to support the return Voss had already presented to investors, Rowan warned that concession assumptions would also need to move. Celine responded, make the structure support the return we presented. The version history showed exactly what happened next. Passenger growth rose. Concession revenue rose. Coverage crossed the threshold. Celine folded her arms. None of that says falsify anything. Mara nodded. You're right, that answer unsettled her. Mara continued. The problem is not that you used the word falsify. The problem is that your own analysts warned you the assumptions were unsupported for base case underwriting. She slid the certification forward. And then you signed this. Celine looked at the page. For the first time, her expression cracked. Not fear. Recognition. She understood the trap now. Mara had never needed Celine to confess. She had only needed Celine to stand behind the model personally. Nadine closed the folder. The consortium has permanently removed Voss Capital from the transaction. Celine's face hardened. That doesn't end anything. No, Mara said. Your board will do that. By evening, Voss Capital placed Celine on administrative leave pending an independent investigation. There were no police waiting downstairs, no spectacular public arrest. just the kind of consequences that actually destroyed careers in Celine's world. Access revoked, clients calling, partners distancing themselves, contracts under review, and a signature she could not explain away. Mara thought that would be the hardest battle. She was wrong. The next morning, Hale Meridian's board rejected the first revised financing proposal. Dorian sat at one end of the conference table, while Mara and two Rourke family office representatives sat across from him. The independent directors were blunt. "This looks terrible," one said. Mara did not argue. Another director continued. "Your father's family office puts capital into your husband's company while the two of you are divorcing. The market will call it a rescue." "Former husband soon," Mara said. "That makes the optics worse, not better." Dorian looked exhausted. Hale Meridian had 72 hours before lenders could tighten restrictions. A distressed debt fund had already offered emergency financing, but the terms were brutal. Dorian could save the company immediately. He could also lose control of it within 2 years. For 10 minutes, Mara watched him study the distressed debt proposal. She knew that look. It was the same look he wore whenever fear convinced him urgency was wisdom. Then Dorian closed the folder. "No." The board chair frowned. "No, I'm not taking it. You may not have another choice." "I do." Dorian stood. "I resign as CEO." The room went silent. Mara stared at him. Dorian continued. "My founder voting rights go into temporary independent governance. Appoint a restructuring officer. Give that person authority over financing decisions." One director leaned forward. "Dorian, do you understand what you're offering?" "Yes." "You could lose operational control." "I know." The words came slower this time. "But keeping my title is what got us here." Mara looked down. He had finally said it without blaming Celine, without blaming lenders, without blaming her. The revised financing structure was completed 48 hours later. Rourke family office provided only a minority share of the bridge capital. Two independent institutional investors supplied the rest. No Rourke entity received control of Hale Meridian. An outside restructuring officer controlled the proceeds. Payroll and contractor obligations came first. Dorian received nothing special. The board approved the deal narrowly. Hale Meridian survived. Dorian did not celebrate. 3 weeks later, Mara and Dorian stood outside the courthouse after signing the final divorce papers. Everything had been settled. Dorian kept his premarital Hale Meridian founder shares. Mara received her proper share of marital earnings, joint investments, and marital property. The Irvington house remained hers through Alara's estate. The legacy trust remained separate. Neither used money as a weapon. The marriage was over. Dorian stood beside the courthouse steps with his hands in his coat pockets. "I know being sorry doesn't undo anything." Mara looked at him. "It doesn't." He nodded. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" "Probably." His eyes lifted. Mara continued before he could misunderstand. "I don't want to carry you around as something I hate for the rest of my life." Dorian swallowed. "Does that mean there could ever be another chance?" "No." The answer came immediately. He stared at her. Mara did not soften it. "I can forgive you and still know I don't want to be your wife again." Dorian looked away toward the street. "Do you think people change?" "Yes." He looked back. "But your change belongs to you," Mara said. "It isn't a debt I have to repay with another marriage." The words hurt him. She could see that. But for once, Dorian did not try to bargain with pain. He nodded. "All right." Their parenting agreement was signed that same week. Mara would be Willa's primary residential parent during infancy. Dorian would have structured parenting time that expanded as she grew. Major medical and educational decisions would be shared. Neither could use parenting access as leverage. The marriage ended. The responsibility did not. Willa was born healthy 6 weeks later. Dorian was at the hospital because Mara wanted her daughter's father there. He held Willa for the first time with tears running silently down his face. He did not ask Mara for anything. That mattered. Over the next 18 months, Dorian became the father he had once promised he would be. He learned feeding schedules, canceled meetings for pediatric appointments, took night duty during his parenting time, never used Willa to create accidental dinners with Mara. At Hale Meridian, he returned not as CEO but as Senior Project Director under the restructuring officer. He answered to someone else. He lost votes. He accepted risk controls he once would have called interference. The company appointed an independent board chair and strengthened its audit committee permanently. Only after 18 months of completed restructuring milestones did the board restore Dorian as CEO. This time, the title came with limits, and he accepted them. Mara changed too. She became chair of risk and governance for the Ellison Rourke Legacy Trust, not CEO of Gideon's empire, not some sudden heiress on a throne. She reviewed assumptions, challenged investment structures, built conflict rules. And because Hale Meridian was controlled by her former husband, she formally recused herself from direct future votes involving the company. Gideon hated the rule, which was how Mara knew it was probably good. Their relationship improved slowly. He stopped treating protection like ownership. She stopped treating distance like strength. Willa got a grandfather. Mara got a father, imperfectly and late. Several months after the airport audit began, Voss Capital terminated Celine for cause. She lost her managing partner role and transaction-related carried interest. Civil claims followed. Her reputation in institutional finance collapsed. She did not return. There was nothing left for her to threaten. 2 years after the day Celine had said Mara had nothing, the North Atlantic Gateway project finally broke ground. Hale Meridian remained part of the consortium. Dorian was CEO under the new governance system. Rourke Family Office remained an investor without controlling Hale Meridian. Willa was nearly 2, and Mara's life no longer orbited around either man. One Sunday evening, Dorian brought Willa home after his parenting weekend. She was asleep against his shoulder. He carried her upstairs, placed her carefully in the crib, and came back down. At the front door he paused. For a long time, he said, "I thought becoming better would somehow earn you back." Mara watched him. "And now? Now I understand becoming better is what I owed myself, our daughter, and everyone I hurt." He gave a tired smile. "Not a price I could pay to get you." Mara nodded. "You became a good father. I'm still working on it. That's why I trust you with her." He understood exactly what she meant and what she did not. "Are we okay?" he asked. Mara considered the question. "We are what we should have learned to be a long time ago." "What's that?" "Honest." Dorian nodded. No kiss followed, no lingering hand, no second chance hidden inside the silence. He left. The next morning, Mara entered the quarterly Legacy Trust meeting. Her nameplate was already waiting. Mara Ellison Rourke chair, Risk and Governance Gideon sat farther down the table. He did not speak for her. He did not decide for her. Mara opened the first investment file. The divorce was final. The property settlement was complete. Willa had 2 present parents. Hale Meridian was stable. Dorian had rebuilt his career without receiving Mara back as a reward. Celine had lost the power she abused. The Rourke-Hale conflict had been closed through formal governance rules. There was no hidden lover, no secret heir, no future reunion waiting somewhere beyond the final page. Mara looked down at the next proposal. For years, she had believed independence meant proving she needed nothing. Now she knew better. Freedom was not having nothing. Freedom was deciding what was worth keeping. And this time, the decision belonged entirely to her.